So today, what I'm going to talk a little bit about is how one can go about funding your research, and as well, after the fact, after you've got all your data, how you can fund your dissemination aspect to that, so whatever that may be, however you typically disseminate research in your field of study. But before I start talking about that, I'm going to distinguish between research that you've got planned and you want to get funding for versus an opportunity, a research opportunity, where you may not have any research ideas, you just want to go and participate in research, or you want to develop a project somewhere else. So I'll first quickly show you some sites that would be helpful for you if you're looking at just general research opportunities. The major one that provides a lot of research experiences in the sciences is the National Science Foundation. And they run a program called Research Experiences for Undergraduates. And these REUs are run all across the country. They are in all different disciplines of science. And you can search for them just Googling NSF REU. You'll need to make sure that you're searching for what we call an REU site, and not a proposal to write a grant to host an REU. But anyway, if you go onto their webpage, you can select the different disciplines that you want to search for, so they have them in all different fields of science. And that provides a really good experience. They're a competitive process, so you have to apply. Most of these applications are due in the fall semester, so you kind of have to plan a bit ahead for those. But it is a competitive process, so it really looks good on your CV or your resume. They're typically run for a summer semester, and we used to have 2 in the Department of Zoology Micro here at Weber. A couple of years ago, we had an RU program. But anyway, that's the first one. And then a couple others I just put up here. The National Institutes of Health offers a similar kind of program. It's an NIH internship type program. There's another one that's fairly interesting. It's the Leadership Alliance. And it's a program that's run in all different disciplines, not necessarily science. So that one is a one in which humanities and other programs can participate in. Some people don't even think about Fulbrights for undergraduate students, but Fulbright opportunities are available as well. And this, as you would imagine, would be a very good boost to your resume or CV as well. And then the Summer Undergraduate Research Program in Educational Psychology, those are also programs that are available. And if you're interested in any of these, just get in touch with me and I can provide you some more information, get you some applications, that kind of thing. Most of these, again, though, are summer programs, and so obviously you need to plan ahead, and most of the application deadlines for those have passed. So what we're going to talk about today, though, is how can you, as a student who has potentially a project already, so we talked about the question and how to develop your literature search and that kind of thing, how can you then get money to do your project? And there are a couple of different avenues. Probably the most widely used is going to your faculty mentor and asking them to fund the project. And a lot of faculty on campus have their own grants, their own contracts, and consequently, so they can actually write you into the project, and so you can fund the project in that way. But if they don't have the money, there are still other opportunities for you. If we look outside the university, these are 2 grants that are specific for undergraduates that you can apply for. And we've had a lot of success with students here at Weber getting funding through these. One is the Sigma Xi, and that's the Scientific Research Society, one of the hosts of, or the sponsors rather, of this seminar series. And you can apply for little mini research grants to do your research projects. And they vary according to what the category is, so they have some extra money assigned for projects that are associated with astronomy or eye or vision research, but typically the grants are about $1,000. If you're doing psychology research, Psych-Hi, which is the International Honor Society for Psychology, also has many funding or many grants available for undergraduates to apply for. And these are just a couple, but I chose those because they're widely used here on our campus, and a lot of students get funding through those sources. However, there is the last one on here, which is probably the major avenue for undergraduate research funding here on campus, and that's through our Office of Undergraduate Research. And so we're going to spend some time talking about that funding process. We have available to students two different categories of funding opportunities. The first is to get you going on your research project, so collecting the data, getting the information, that's the research grant side. And then we also have travel to disseminate grants. We have broken up our research grants into two different categories based on whether or not this is going to be a project that's assigned to a course. So if you're in a research methods class, something like that, you can still get funding through this semester or exploratory grant. It's a $1,000 maximum award, and we'll talk about some of the specifics there. Versus a more in-depth, long-term project that may require several semesters. It may require the summer to do the research, that kind of thing. And the funding for those was $3,500. And then finally, once you've completed your research, you need to go out and disseminate it to a professional organization, professional society, a conference. We can fund you to travel to do that as well, and that's the dissemination grants. Let's take a look at these resources. All of the information for these grants are located on the Office of Undergraduate Research webpage, and the URL is weber.edu/OUR. And when you open it up, you'll notice on the left we have our link for grants, okay? And we have our grants and fellowship page that links then to the page that describes the different grants that are available. This first one here is the Performance Conference Travel Grant, so the dissemination grant, and then we go on to describe those other two that I just mentioned, the semester and the long term. For our research grants, the in-depth and the semester grants are reviewed and evaluated by a committee of faculty from around the campus. And as a consequence, we only have 4 calls for proposals every year. So we offer 2 funding rounds in the fall and 2 in the spring. Okay? We are, at this point in the semester, past the first call for proposals. And the last call for proposals for this semester is in April. And you can check the calendar of events here to find out these dates. So if you scroll down, our last call for proposals is on April 1st. And that's when the grant applications are going to be due. So if you're thinking about submitting a proposal, you need to keep that date in mind. Okay?
Are first calls given priority over second calls?
No, they're all independent. So students that applied in February, if they didn't get accepted, which we didn't have any that were rejected in February, but if they didn't, they could apply in April, and there would be no preference assigned.
So it's just kind of a way to...
Just to spread it out. And typically, if we look at the numbers of grant applications we get, the last one in the spring semester is the one that is the most popular, because that grant is around is where people are asking for their summer money. So we have a lot of students that want to fund their research over the summer. So there's a bit more competition in that last one, but it's still a fairly good process. All right, so we have a group of faculty members representing all the different disciplines on campus. So you can apply no matter what discipline you're from for funding for research or scholarly work. Now, the one piece of information you need to know is that the list, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear on the difference between the performance/conference travel grants and the other two grants.
Okay, so the performance travel are for students that have already completed their project.
Okay.
They've gotten everything done, and now they need to disseminate that out to the wider audience. Okay, so that's for if you finished your project, you want to go to a conference and present a poster, present an oral presentation, that kind of thing. So I'm going to spend most of the time talking about the other two, and I think at the end of the semester we have two folks that are going to talk about how to disseminate your research. The thing you need to pay attention to know, though, is that your research grants are evaluated by these folks that are listed here. Okay, so we have representation from all across campus. We have somebody from business and economics, arts and humanities, education, science, you name it. The implication of that is that you need to realize when you're writing up a project that you have to write it to a broad audience. An educated audience, they're all faculty members, but an audience that is not going to be sufficiently familiar with your particular topic. So keep that in mind as we're talking about these grants, okay? All right, so let's go through here and take a look at these two different kinds of grants that we have. So we mentioned that we have the in-depth long-term grant, and then we also have the semester exploratory grant. If you are doing a research project tied to a course, like a research methods class, you are not eligible for the long-term grant, okay? And you need to apply for the semester exploratory. These grants have a limitation in that the amount that you can receive is $1,000. You can't get any more than that. And the funding for that would cover supplies and equipment. If you needed to drive to a field site, we could pay for mileage, that kind of thing, okay? If you're doing a long-term project, something that, like I said, would involve several semesters, independent kind of research, the summer, then you're eligible for the long-term in-depth grant. These have a maximum of $3,500, and within this budget, you can ask not only for supplies, equipment, travel to go collect your data, that kind of thing, but you can also ask for a stipend, a research stipend to pay yourself to do the research. And then the maximum amount that is allowed for a stipend is $2,500. So of the $3,500, $2,500 can be for a research stipend. Okay? Let's take a look at these applications and see what is involved with these different grants. So this is the page that describes each of the grants. This first page here is the in-depth long-term grant. And we have a number of requirements that are associated with each of these grants. And you should go through and read it very, very carefully as you're preparing to submit your proposal. Because if you don't address some of these things, then obviously the committee isn't going to look too favorably on it. And one of the things you should keep in mind when you're writing grants is you want to make it as easy as possible on the committee, and you don't want to give them reasons to reject your proposal. Probably you'll find some anyway, and you don't want to give them any more. So you want to be very, very careful about making sure you follow directions, get all the signatures that are required, and so forth. We have kind of a high bar that we've established if you're going to request a stipend, and you can look through some of those, but the requirement is that we want to make sure that students that are getting a stipend are going to demonstrate to the committee that they're going to cut time out of another job or manipulate their schedule in some way, that they're going to make room for this extra funding that they're going to be receiving. So take a look at those pieces of information. Let's go through the grant application. Everything is the same for these two grants with the exception of the stipend. Okay, so that's the only thing that's different between these two. So when we describe these different components here, you'll just keep that in mind. All right, so this is the cover page on the grant application that you'll see, and it provides you with information about the purpose of the grant, who's eligible. You have to be a student currently enrolled, and you have to work with a mentor. So we have that requirement. You have to have a mentor, and the mentor can either be a faculty member or a staff member. And then we have our proposal information here, and it describes the order in which the information is going to come, and just the general stuff. It has to be no more than 4 pages, 12 fonts. So you then look on the other side here, the other column, and we have some deadlines and timelines. And you should pay attention to these because when you sit down to write a grant, you often lose track of how much time it actually takes to do all these other little pieces, like get signatures, get approval, and those kind of things. If you are dealing with animals or humans, you have to get approval for the research through 2 different committees. If you're using human subjects, we have a committee on campus called the IRB Committee, Institutional Review Board, and you have to fill out an application for that research that you're going to do. It's fairly easy. They have an online system. It's no big deal, and basically students rely on their mentors to help them through that process. The other aspect is if you're working with animals, primarily vertebrate animals, you have to have approval through the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee as well. Okay? Now, we don't require that the committees have acted or given you approval before we review them, the proposals. We do require that you at least look into that and prepare your application to these. So you don't have to have a yes or no answer from them before you can submit to the OUR research grant committee.
So what happens if you get approved by OUR but not approved by IRB?
You never get your money until we have verification from IRB or the Animal Care and Use Committee that they've approved your research. So technically you have the paperwork saying you were funded, but you don't get funded.
And isn't it not usually like you're not rejected of IRB to make changes to your...
Typically, I don't know of any, I mean, it depends, like if you're working on a sensitive group or something, they may have major hurdles that would require that you couldn't do it such, you couldn't do the project, so it could work that way. But generally, your mentors that you're working with have done this kind of stuff and are familiar with the processes. Okay. So pay attention to that. And we do ask on the form, and I'll show you in a minute, that you check off the box whether or not you've received that approval and if you require that approval. 10 days before the proposal's due, you should make an appointment with your mentor, and hopefully you're already working with them all along in this project, and get the sign-off by your mentor. Okay? The mentor signature indicates then to the committee that the mentor is on board with the proposal. Okay? They've read through it, they understand what's in there, and it's assumed that the mentor is giving you advice, giving you suggestions and that kind of thing. Okay? So we suggest about 10 days beforehand doing that. Then, 5 days before the proposal is due, you should make an appointment with your representative on the Undergraduate Research Committee. So I showed you the list of the committee members. Each college has at least one faculty member who's on the committee. So you should make an appointment with them show them your proposal, allow them to read it, and give you comments. Because they will be then your advocate on the proposal, okay, during the meeting. If you fail to do this, if you fail to give your committee representative enough time to make comments, or you just didn't do it, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't turn in your proposal, but it certainly indicates that you've done things at the last minute, and there probably are things in the proposal that are going to be needing to be corrected. So this gives you an opportunity to pass your proposal by somebody who's been reading these undergraduate research proposals for many semesters and get some really good feedback from them, okay? We also put a note in here that you should remember that everybody around here is obviously busy doing other things as well as reading research proposals. So you need to give them at least this amount of time. And so if you hand in your proposal to a member of the committee the day it's due and ask them to sign it, they're not going to be too happy, and they're probably not going to be too much of an advocate for your proposal if they didn't even have a chance to read it. Okay? All right. So then after you turn in your proposal, well, when you get ready to turn in your proposal, we've gone to an electronic format, so you'll submit an electronic version and then a hard copy that's filed in the files. Okay, that goes into the Office of Undergraduate Research, which has its office downstairs here in the library. And we then send those proposals out to all the members on the committee. Okay? So each of the members on the committee is sitting in their own office or wherever they're reading these proposals, and they will rank your proposals. Okay? All the proposals we receive are ranked by the committee members. Once they've finished evaluating and ranking them, they'll send that ranking back to the office, and then we compute an average ranking across all the committee members, and we then call a meeting, a physical in the room kind of meeting. Everybody gets together, and we discuss your proposals in that order. So the best proposals get discussed first, and we keep going down that list until we're done, or, as often happens, we run out of money. Okay? Now, the reason I tell you this is because it's important, as I mentioned before, to consider the fact that you're not going to have someone at this point in the process advocating for your proposal. If someone in arts and humanities reading it alone, you need to be able to convey your project proposal in a language that's going to be easily understood and very, very clear. Okay? After everybody gets together, then we get faculty helping to explain, well, he meant this is the process that it'll usually take for this kind of an experiment, or they'll provide some sort of advocacy when the meeting commences. So remember that you're writing to a general but educated audience. About 2 weeks after that proposal deadline, then you'll receive notice of either funding or not. And we actually have 3 different categories. One is accepted for funding, one is rejected, and then a third we sometimes use is what we call revise and resubmit. The committee thinks there's a lot of value to the proposal, but there were some issues that need to be addressed, and so we'll ask the student to revise it and resubmit it for a second evaluation. Okay? We also have the line item veto on budgets. So it is not uncommon for the committee to say, yeah, we'll fund you for these things, but we can't fund you for that. So those are obviously all possible combinations for funding. Okay, so that's just the general process. And if you have questions as we go through this, let me know and I can spend some time. Let's take a look now at the application, and we'll go through the different sections here. The cover page is the page where you have to get all the signatures and everything. So the first section here just gives you general information about the faculty member, who's going to be your mentor, all the students that are involved. So if it's a multi-student project, we have separate pages that can be added in for student participants and so forth. And then also here is the line where it says this project does or does not require review by WSU's Institutional Review Board or the Animal Care Use Committee. So you have to indicate that. Okay? Signature section there. Here's our section for your undergraduate research committee representative to sign off. And then also, we ask that you get the signature from the department chair. And so when you are at that 5-day threshold of getting your research committee signature, you should plan on also getting your department chair to sign off on that. Okay? And your faculty mentor can help you secure that also. We require that you attend a proposal workshop, so if you are going to submit, you can count today as it. I'll have you sign in so that you can get credit for attending. We do require that you attend a session because we do get a lot of common mistakes that are made, and hopefully we can eliminate some of those by having you attend a proposal workshop. So here is a page for additional students. And many projects have multiple students authored or on their projects, and this is just pages that allow for that. Okay? And then the next page is the budget page. All right? And we have listed here different categories that students typically use funding for. And we also have the different rows or different columns here that represent different sources of funding. Because a lot of times students will do a project and they only get a portion of their funding just from OUR. And they actually have other pieces of funding for the project. And this is really important to know, because if you have department money that are being used, or you have an outside grant that your mentor is using to fund your project, it tells the committee that this is a valued piece of research that others are willing to participate in funding. And so it looks fairly good to have these other kind of funding.
So would Sigma Xi be an example
Yeah.
of someone else?
Yeah. So if you've got a $1,000 Sigma Xi grant and it's going to fund a portion of this project, you would put it here in the outside agency fund category, and you'd list that down, and then you'd do a good job of explaining that in your budget description, because that's a big feather in your hat, right? Because you got that grant. And then this is the column then that you're using to fill in how much you're asking from the Office of Undergraduate Research. This is the total of each row. Okay? I tell you that because we have a lot of mistakes with that. And then just general categories, and you can fill in below. So if you are using something up in your research, that consists of materials and supplies. And you can give general information. So if you're doing a survey for psychological research or something, you don't need to list all the detailed information, like you need 500 pens, you need 3 reams of paper and all that kind of stuff. You can just categorize it into survey supplies, and in parentheses you can put paper, pens, that kind of thing, and the amount. Okay? Equipment are things that are used for the project but can be used again. Okay, so they're not consumable. So if you need a pair of binoculars, you can ask for funding for that, and that would be in the equipment line. Okay?
Where does the equipment go after the project is completed?
All things purchased at Weber State, no matter if a department pays for it, an office, or individual faculty member using campus funds, remains the property of the university. So for equipment, those kind of things, and leftover materials and supplies, they go back to your faculty mentor. And they use that then to support other students.
What happens if you have money left over?
That's a good thing.
Because I've heard from other people that it's bad to have leftover money.
Well, you're asking the wrong person, because I manage a budget, and if you have money left over, I can put that into somebody else's grant next time. If you're writing at an external agency or something, they don't generally have that flexibility. So if I had a grant with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I didn't use all that funding, then they can't just dump it into another account necessarily. So for us, it's a good thing, and it doesn't look bad on you or your project if you don't use all your money. But you can't take it and use it for another project,
Right.
for example. If there were some things that came up in your research that you forgot to budget for, and you call up Aaron and you say, Aaron, we have extra money in this line item, can I use it to cover that we didn't realize? We can generally do that.
But we can't do it, this should not be used for travel, is that correct?
No, well, travel to disseminate.
To disseminate, right. You shouldn't use anything in here to disseminate.
But if Josh needs to travel out to the southwest corner of Great Salt Lake to collect data,
Then it can.
you can budget for
Okay.
that. The next item on here is the stipend line. And at Weber State, the guidelines for establishing or setting up a stipend is to figure out how much time is going to be required to do that project. And then you estimated about $10 an hour. Okay? Realizing that it can't go above $2,500 for the project in the stipend. And then you would then include benefits. So the stipend plus benefits has to be less than $2,500. Now the benefits are benefits that are paid by the university anytime we have an employee. These are not benefits that you seek. So you're not going to get health insurance, you're not going to get life insurance, that kind of thing. This is workers' comp insurance. This is the university's component or proportion of the Social Security, that kind of thing. Okay? So it's not benefits you ever see, but we have to budget for that. So you have to include your 8.5% benefits into that amount. And the stipend and benefits, can't exceed $2,500. If you fail to itemize your benefits out of that, we will have to reduce the stipend you've requested by enough to cover the benefits. Okay? So always make sure you put your benefits in, or else your stipend will be reduced. Okay? And then we have a line here for mileage to gather data. The university pays a rate of 36 cents per mile. So if you have to do a lot of traveling to get data collected, then that's where you can do it right there. Okay? Now, obviously, we haven't covered all potential aspects for materials, equipment, and those kind of things. So if you do have questions as you're putting together your proposal, by all means, call up and ask the office. Also, your undergraduate research committee rep will be able to help catch some things and help you finalize those kind of things. So here are some of the guidelines that we've just talked about already, and those are at the bottom of the page. All right, so now we have the real part of the proposal here, and that is the body of the proposal. And we've divided up the proposal into sections. And when you download this, you can get this as a Word document or as a PDF. And most people choose to use this as a Word document because then they can just fill in here as they write their proposal. The first section of the grant proposal is your project description. Okay? And we provide you some information about what needs to be in your project description, and also indicate that you should probably be around 2 pages or so. Some of the important things that we require in the project description are that we have some background information about why the question is important or the topic area that you're researching, so we need some background information. And we require that the student have at least 2 citations. Okay? And obviously, you have to be able to do your research in the context of what has already been done. And so that's the requirement, is that you look into what else other people have done. Okay? The other important thing here is that you very, very clearly indicate what your project question is. What is your research question you're trying to answer? if I were to give you the reason why 90% of projects don't get funded, it's because the committee didn't understand or couldn't find what the research question is. And the other piece of advice I would give you is that you should make it easy for the committee to find your question. And I'm not opposed to you bolding your research question or underlining your research question. Okay? Because this will set the stage for everything else in the proposal. What is it you're trying to answer? And what is the question? Once you've got that, then everything else is very easy and falls into place. Okay? So we ask you to very clearly identify that for the committee, and then also put or frame your project into what has already been done in that study area by getting references. Another component of the project description is we want to know what your role is in the project. Okay? We have this continuum that we developed of undergraduate research that extends from the one end where you're entirely dependent on the faculty mentor. So the mentor has basically said, this is what you're going to do, and this is how you're going to do it, and give me the data as you're collecting it, and I will analyze it and put it together, and we'll be done. Okay? So that's basically the dependency side of it. So you're helping the faculty member do his research or her research, or all the way over to the other side, which is completely independent, where the student has designed, developed their project, also in consultation with the faculty mentor, but it's more of an independent. We want you to describe that. And a lot of people just simply put this continuum on there and put a little check mark or an X where they fall within that continuum. Okay? There is not a right or wrong answer here. Okay, we're just asking where along this continuum this project fits. Okay, so it's not going to do you in if you're on the left side versus the right. Okay, any questions about the project description? Okay, the next section is the methods and timeline, and it's basically what it says is how you're going to do the project. What is the key pieces of information that are going to be needed to be collected, and when will they be collected? And the timeline that we ask for is just a very general one, so we don't hold you to those, but say if you're going to do a project over the summer, we want to know, say, by May, that you have sent all your surveys out, okay? By July, you expect all of them to be returned, and by August, you're going to have the analysis complete, okay? So just very general, broad guidelines to help the committee understand that process. We also want you to understand and have a sense of whether or not it's doable within your timeline. So if you're going to be graduating, for example, in December, will you have enough time to get all this done? Okay. The method section obviously is important in that it provides the information to the committee that you have really sat down and thought through the actual implementation of the project. And a number of times, if you're writing a proposal and you have, for example, a survey that you're going to be mailing out, the committee likes to see what you're going to be sending. We have a number of people on our committee that are experts in different fields of study, and so they want to see that information. So if you have a data form that you're going to be using or a survey, you can put that at the end as an appendix, and it really helps the committee understand what you're doing. Okay? So that's the timeline and methods section. The next section is the budget explanation. And here, you're going to go back to your front page there, you have the budget spreadsheet, and you're going to explain why those things are important. Okay? It's also here that you're going to need to, if you've requested a stipend, you're going to need to spend some time trying to convince the committee that a stipend is necessary. Okay? So associated with this, we want to know what your other, if you're requesting a stipend, what are your other significant time commitments that you're going to have? All right? Are you president of this organization and that organization? You have a full-time job outside of campus? What's your course schedule like? And how are you going to fit this research project into your busy, busy life? Okay? And the reason is that if you're asking for money, we get the impression that this is a substantial commitment on your part. Okay? So we want to make sure that that is abided by. We also want to know if you are working, that you'll be able to tailor back on your job in order to do the project. And this was the reason why a lot of this money was donated, by the way, is that we convinced donors that our students at Weber are very busy and they need to work, and many times to support their education and to support their families in many circumstances. So as a consequence of that, they don't have time to do research. The only time that they can afford is if they could cut back on some of these other things, and so that's how we were able to secure a lot of the funding sources that we do. Okay, that is the budget section. Any questions so far? Those sections comprise the main body of your proposal. Okay? At the end, we have two other things that we ask. One is that you go through and answer these additional questions. If you've received funding from the Office of Undergraduate Research in the past, tell us you have, and where has your previous project been disseminated? Okay, we don't want you just to do research projects for the sake of doing a project. We want you to actually be contributing to knowledge in your field. And in order to do that, you have to disseminate it. And that's either as a publication, writing it, or as an oral presentation, a poster presentation, and preferably both. Okay? Preferably both, as in a written as well as a conference presentation.
As a conference presentation, is that recorded anywhere? So like, for those of us who are presenting it at the symposium at Weber State or at NCUR, like, is there a description of our research that will be published along with that conference, or no?
For the symposium here, we will put together and put your abstract in the program book.
Okay.
But I would not list that as a published abstract. On the other hand, and the reason is because we don't send them out for peer review. It's only available basically on our campus for that. On the other hand, if you present at the National Conference on Undergraduate Research, NCUR, they do have a proceedings that's published. So you can actually take your presentation and convert it into a manuscript. It gets reviewed, you can submit it, and so that you would count as a publication. But you would count this on your CV under a line called presentations. So you would get credit for doing them on your CV under that category. If you are asking for a stipend, or rather, if you're asking for funding and you are doing this as well as getting course credit, we want to know that as well. We assume a lot of students will do this as part of an undergraduate research thesis or something like that. We want that information to be put available there for us as well.
Dr. Cavitt?
Yes.
So is this the main way you give an accounting for this money you receive is through dissemination, or?
Yeah. Yeah. We require that everybody that receives funding through our office has to, at the very least, present at our symposium in the spring. So that's one requirement for every project. We don't want you to just limit your presentation to our Weber State campus. We want you to go and experience professional conferences as well. So we encourage you to do that too. Also, what additional funding sources have you utilized? We can list those down here. Is your department willing or able to fund some of the materials? We had a period of time where everybody in one department was asking for digital recorders. And I bet we funded probably 50 digital recorders. And they should still be around campus, so people still should be able to use those. So can you go to your department and say, can we borrow equipment and that kind of thing to help offset some of the costs of the project? And as I mentioned about dissemination, you certainly, in the very, very least, have to put that you're going to disseminate it here at our undergraduate research symposium, but also think about other places that you might want to disseminate. I think it should be the goal of every student researcher to publish their research. That should be your goal right off the top. Now, not everybody will make that, but certainly that should be your goal. That you want to get a publication before you're done. And that happens quite frequently here. And then here's the section that I described earlier about your time commitments for those of you that are requesting stipends. So that's the list of questions that you, the student, are going to need to complete before you can turn in your proposal. Then we also have a list of questions that you're going to ask your faculty mentor to complete. And we do ask that the faculty mentor not attach a separate letter, but actually just fill in here. It makes it much easier for the reviewers if they do that. And so your mentor will read these questions and address them. And you will turn this sheet in with you will turn that in with your project. Okay? See if I can open it again. Or your proposal. You'll turn that in with your proposal. So that is pretty much the extent of the writing a proposal kind of piece for getting funded for research. We have 5 minutes left, and I'll be happy to answer, or even ask you questions if you want. Any questions you might have about that? I can also go into kind of some tips and whatnot, but I don't know if we have time. Yeah.
So let's say that you miss the deadlines and something comes up at the end of the semester that you would like funding for, like for travel, for example. How do you go about doing that? Can you get reimbursed later on? Or?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big no-no. You cannot, if you need to start collecting your data before you've heard, you can do that, but we cannot fund any kind of expenses that have, or any kind of purchases that have been already made. Okay, so you can't do that. Once you receive funding, you'll get notification. You'll have to attend a little workshop on how to make purchases. It's actually a complicated process here at the university. There are specific requirements for each kind of purchase and that kind of thing. If you are going to travel to disseminate, those grants don't have any deadlines, so they are reviewed as we receive them, but we require at least 2 weeks. Okay, so that helps facilitate people that have conferences at different schedules all during the year, and so you can think ahead, get your proposal together for that, submit it, get your funding notification within 2 weeks. Okay, and those proposals are not reviewed by the entire committee. It's just in-house, and we have not rejected any travel proposals for anything other than the fact that they've asked for too much, or we can't fund their trip to New Zealand or something like that. Okay. So those are fairly easy to secure once you've completed your research. Any other questions? Okay. All right, thank you. Pizza.